So today we're going to be doing a little test.
Yeah, now this isn't just like some random little test. This is one of the biggest things that are debated online. We're talking about the Canon color science versus the Sony color science. Most people seem to agree that Canon has sort of a special magic look to it, especially when it comes to skin tones and like magentas and greens and stuff like that.
So we spent a few days just filming in a few different environments, in daylight, in mixed light, some shots just in the office.
And also keep in mind that just for the test, to be fair, we wanted to use the latest camera from Sony and the latest from Canon. So 5D Mark IV, A7R III, yeah, that's it.
All right, let's dig in. Kyle, hit that.
So this is Canon color on the left and Sony on the right. We didn't use any crazy picture profiles like S-Log or any of that stuff. We just kept it standard. Of course, the settings were always the same on both cameras. We wanted it to just look similar in camera, so literally comparing the back of the screens on both cameras and getting the closest result possible.
The Canon footage on the left looks a little bit green, and the one on the Sony footage looks pretty correct, although it looks a little bit like there's not enough vibrancy in the reds.
It almost seems like the Canon footage has some post-processing done to it already, even though there might not be as much detail in the skin. It's nicer. There's something nicer about it, you know? Almost as if there was a little bit of a cinematic grade to it.
Out of the box, the Canon just has an immediate punch and kind of look to it. Without me bouncing around like an idiot.
All right, so what do you see here, Dale?
The white balance in cloudy conditions on the Sony seems to be really hitting the mark for me. It has a coldness to it that I think looks very cinematic right now.
Yeah, I think overall for me, it's like when I look at the Sony, I feel like it gives me a little bit more of the color that we saw when we were actually there shooting. But that's not to say that the Canon isn't pleasant. Like, I like the look of the Canon, that little bit of green tint.
The oranges over here look more saturated, in my opinion.
It just looks way more natural.
Yeah, so this is a completely different lighting situation we've got now.
Here, the blacks are definitely like a little bit more crushed in the Canon footage. But again, it's just like the light on the jacket. The Sony footage, like, it has all the information there. It's less contrasty. There's kind of like a magenta tint going on in the shadows.
It's so much more magenta on the Sony.
Absolutely.
That things like imperfections in the skin kind of stand out. I guess a more natural skin look is something that's more towards like a yellow or a beige or a green rather than a magenta-y.
And the skin tones on the Canon just look so much more natural. The Sony footage, there's so much detail in the face that it's like the color skin tones make me look a little bit sick. I'm like Steve Bannoning over here.
Yeah, it's like you've been scratching your face almost.
Yeah.
Those magentas stand out.
So the blue in the background's a lot more saturated, I feel, on this one. The red in the hood is much more saturated on this one as well.
The Sony.
The other thing is I'm looking at the hood and it seems pretty saturated here. Again, we're looking at like the magenta channel. But here it's a little more muted and just more natural and pleasant to look at.
In the shadows of the face, it's green on the Canon. On the Sony, the shadows are more magenta cast.
Yeah, overall just a more magenta cast that you might be able to adjust just with a little bit of white balance shift. Something that you'd have to like double check before you shoot, so it's still an extra little step to do compared to Canon.
Just the look out of the box, the face and human skin just kind of pops a little bit more than the Sony does. Like, as we're seeing here, the Sony's a little bit flatter, but the subject kind of blends in a little bit more into the background, whereas with the Canon, Kyle's just really jumping out in that shot to me.
Yeah, if you look at the shadow area here on the cheek here, everything seems flat on the Sony, whereas you get that depth on the Canon.
And again, we're not scientists at all, and we're just people who have shot with a lot of different cameras, and this is just like what we're noticing.
Yeah, the one thing it does remind me of is, for example, in Camera Raw or in Lightroom, the clarity slider. It kind of feels like this has more clarity, like the image overall compared to the Sony. Stabilization.
Oh yeah.
No stabilization.
That is one thing that Sony will crush Canon on all of these tests is hand-holding, the in-body stabilization. When you see the Canon footage, it's shaky as hell. This looks like a cinematic, like, graded shot, and it's right out of camera. I mean, the Sony footage just looks so stock and flat compared to the Canon footage.
And the sweater just looks like it has a lot more just color information in general.
You can actually see, I feel, the pores and maybe wrinkles and stuff on your skin a lot more on the Sony. But whether that's a good or bad thing, it's hard to say, right? Because there is more detail, but you're kind of like showing these imperfections, right? Okay, so after comparing that footage, we actually did a matched grade to try to make the two images look the most similar possible. And here it is. Let's confuse the viewers for a second. Which one do you think is Sony and which one do you think is Canon out of these two?
I would immediately say that the left side would be Sony this time.
I feel like they've been flipped, but I don't know if that's true. The image on the left, that seems to me like it's Canon, but this now has a green cast, and that might just be because of the monitor difference. But the punch in the eyes and the softness on the skin tells me that that's a Canon image. So again, I know for sure that this is the Canon image because, as we were talking earlier, the contrast and the detail on the face and just the punch that Kyle is separated from the background, whereas this one's blended in a little bit more.
Yeah, I feel like we did get quite a bit closer. I mean, if you look at the Sony footage, you see some cool details, like the rim of the hat here is more visible and stuff. I'd probably still go for the Canon, but it's really close. It's really close.
And when you actually like play the footage, there is like so little difference. Like you're looking at the same footage almost.
Was it really close? I think they look pretty much the same.
Once you've completed a grade, you can get that footage to look almost identical. If you were shooting a 2-camera setup, you could get those shots to look almost identical if you set them up closely before you started filming.
Yeah, it seems to me that with you know, just a little bit of color grading, you can definitely work around this color difference.
And the differences are quite minor. Not big enough to make one a clear loser, and that it wouldn't functionally do just as good of a job.
I guess in all of our opinions, we saw that the Canon color out of the box was more interesting, more appealing to the eye. But then with a little bit of color correction, it seemed like they, you know, it was a close battle. Yeah.
Almost identical footage from either Sony or Canon, once graded.
The big thing to keep in mind here is that we're not comparing the cameras themselves. We're really just comparing the color science here. Because there's a lot of reasons why you would want to pick, in my opinion, Sony over Canon when it comes to shooting video. Because, you know, IBIS,
120 frames, no 4K crop.
Massive crop.
One of the things that get talked about is the 400 megabit codec on the Canon is a little hefty. It's a little bit too much to work with, but I found that it was actually giving me a lot of color information, especially in the shadows, which I thought was great.
So if you don't mind the extra hard drive space that you're gonna have to deal with, like Sony files are incredibly efficient and you can almost get the same look, but if you're shooting with Canon, you've got a lot of information there. So not only can you get it to look good right out of the box, with a little extra work, you can get it to look phenomenal.
I did have an issue though with the 4 gigabyte limit on the files. I'm not sure if that's something that can be fixed by maybe using another type of card or anything, but
we would love to hear your feedback.
We'd love to see your own tests, because like we did one test in a few lighting conditions and just with the Sony a7R III. We'd like to see other Canon cameras against other Sony cameras and just get a better you know, general opinion.
Leave a comment below if you have any questions about the video.
And please hit that like button, it really helps us a lot.
And don't forget to subscribe, that's the most important thing.
Yeah, if you want to see more videos like this, we put out vlogs every Tuesday.
And that's it, we'll catch you guys on the next one. Take care, bye-bye.
Peace!
We're polycamerous, which means we use any camera brand.